Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Mike. If you haven't noticed already, I'm not Mark. Mark is teaching our workshops, and he's traveling to, I think he said Nashville this week, and in Vegas coming up, and off somewhere else after, I believe Pittsburgh's coming up. Um, and if you don't get a chance, or you haven't got a chance to ever experience Mark in person, you absolutely should. But today, he's in between flights and in between travel. And so I am going to try to step in his gigantic shoes and do my best to fill uh, the role as presenter today. And today, the topic is on company culture. And I'm going to do a little bit of a spin on this that might be different than traditional company cultures. I like whoever came up with the title for this one. Company culture is the way it is. Are you happy with yours? So, is the way it is the part that I really like. Company culture isn't something that you can just talk about. It's not something that is going to get fixed by a couple of barbecues and pizza lunches. Company culture is the way your company operates. And so, what I hope to talk about today is not about pizza parties and about events and networking and connections and all that kind of stuff. And that's not to say all that stuff isn't really good. We will have another one about that. In fact, we got a couple of great speakers lined up. One of my favorite people in the industry is going to talk about his company. And I've been watching his culture for years because it's on YouTube and it's fun and it's exciting. And I've had a chance to tour his shop and he's going to crush that. And I highly encourage you to jump in when that comes. It's watch out for Paul St. Pierre. Dynamic guy who built a dynamic company and has a great success story, but he also has an incredible nose for company culture, employee retention, and all that kind of stuff. So he's going to do that because he's going to do a lot better job than that than I will. I'm going to focus today on the more tactical work related parts of company culture. One of the things that gets underlooked, I think, as part of company culture is the way it is, right? And the way it is isn't like every couple of months we're going to do something exciting. Sure, those things are good. Again, not dismissing that. Is the way it is, though, is like what your employees have to deal with every single day. And I want to focus on that. I want to talk a bit about that. I want to talk a bit about how to improve that in a way that retains and keeps better people. And I also want to finish up this mastermind session talking about what we're doing about it. So I'm the CTO here at LMN. Myself, along with my team, head up product development. And so what I want to give you is a flavor for what we're doing to recognize that culture is important to our users, our companies, our accounts, whatever you want to call them, and how we're approaching building software in a way that respects and takes this into account. And so I'll finish up the day with that. But let's start by recognizing a problem. Our industry always has, but it seems to be even worse lately, a workforce shortage. I'm trying to remember the statistic Mark threw out there. It's either 150,000 or 200,000 workers short. It might be 180,000 workers short in this industry. So the government, when they do the labor studies, has identified a gap of 180,000 positions and available staff to fill those positions. And so what we have is a workforce shortage in our industry, which is A, understandable, and also B, questionable. I've also heard a stat that landscaping has made more small business millionaires than any other industry. And that wouldn't necessarily surprise me. There's a lot of people that have started landscape companies that have done really well. So why does this trade that has made a whole lot of people pretty successful at the expense of a whole lot of work? It's a hard working industry for sure. But why do we have this gigantic gap between the potential or opportunities to succeed in this industry and the number of people that are willing to take those opportunities? And I think if you look at this list, you can recognize why it starts here. So this list came from actually compiling a whole bunch of studies on the internet. I didn't spend hours doing this. I had ChatGPT do it. But regardless, it came back with these 10. Now, whether these are exactly the top 10, who knows? But it's certainly, I wouldn't argue with any of them, right? Landscaping is seasonal for a lot of us. Maybe not so if you're in Texas, but for a lot of us, it's seasonal. It's physically demanding. There's a lot of turnover in the industry. There is a lack of skill development opportunity. So a lack of good training, a lack of good skill development recognition training. If you were to compare landscaping as a trade with some of its other peer trades, stonemasonry, carpentry, plumbing, electrician, these trades have defined career paths, educational paths, apprenticeships, things that people can get in, develop their skills, and work their way up the pay scale, essentially. Could also be for other reasons, but certainly that's a big one. Landscaping kind of lacks that, right? We have a certification program. It's not widely adopted. Certainly, I guess you could argue not widely recognized. It's good to have, don't get me wrong. It's what thousands of hours went into it, not disparaging it, just hasn't caught on like you would a carpenter, where you're going to go up the thing. And yeah, it's unionized and that kind of stuff. But the idea is that there's a plan. We don't have that plan. So we're going to lose people that would otherwise maybe be interested in our trades to trades like carpentry and electrician, where there is that path for opportunity. Variable working hours is another big one. Again, largely a lot of trades suffer from this. We can go back to electricians and plumbers. Plumbers, they're doing fixes at night, whatever. But it's a hindrance, right? People like more stability. Now, if worse than a plumber, if I'm getting laid off all winter and I don't know when I'm going to work, or I'm going to work at inconvenient times, that's certainly an issue why people might be dissuaded from this. There's communication challenges. Again, a lot of work out in the field. There's a lack of recognition and appreciation. Again, there's no defined career path. And for a lot of companies, there's no defined metrics. I don't know the stat, but let's say 9 out of 10 companies don't really have job costing nailed down. And if I don't have job costing, it's kind of hard to actually evaluate anybody's true performance. And so when that happens, you get good people, high performing people. What do they want? Recognition for their performance. What aren't they getting? The recognition for their performance. And so what ends up happening is you dissuade high performing people from coming in here, and you attract people that don't want their performance measured or recognized, which obviously is not what we want. Then there's safety concerns. There's wage and benefits issues, largely, again, tying back to career paths and certifications and whatever. It's a lower paid trade than the others, for sure. It's changing. It's getting better, but certainly a lot of work to be done there. And then last, the lack of training programs. So I think that you have and we have the opportunity to impact 70% of this. And if you can impact 70%, you're going to give your company a distinct competitive advantage over your competition in attracting and keeping good talent. And it is so important, because every time we lose good talent, A, it's a hole in our company. B, maybe that talent goes and works for our competitors, and now it's a double loss. Right now we've got a high performing person over there. So it is incumbent upon us to face these challenges, to look at what we can do about them, and to try to mitigate them in our company. I'm not saying you're going to get rid of all of these immediately, but 70% of these we can address in our companies today. And that will make our companies a more appealing place to work and also give us a higher retention rate. So how do we do this? Well, first of all, we have to recognize that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, people worked for a paycheck and everything else was gravy, but people came to work for a paycheck. Not so much anymore, right? We have to look beyond that. You can continue to do that. You can continue to say like, hey, this worked for me 20 years ago. It's still going to work today. You'll probably struggle to find people that are wired like that today. And so it's a choice, right? You can choose to do that. It's probably not going to be very successful. And it's changing even worse as time goes on, right? But that's okay. We can solve that. In fact, the earlier we solve that, the better position we're going to be in. We need to look at ways to enhance job experiences. People don't want to just show up and mindlessly work for a check anymore. That was common. I don't want to cast any sort of generalizations, but if you worked in a factory or a mine or something in the 50s, that's what you did. You went, you punched in, you ground out your labor, you punched out and went home. You didn't think, you didn't have to think, you weren't expected to. People don't work as much like that anymore. Even people in factories and mining scenarios are driving heavy equipment, are using robots, are like they're employing all kinds of their own, the manual labor is happening at a different level. And they're participating in that at a more cerebral level. So using their minds. Now think about for a second how this industry often hires people and what their first day is like. Not saying everybody on this call's first day like this, but it's pretty common. We bring in somebody, maybe they've had an interview, often not, right? They answered an ad. We asked them some questions over email or text. Their answers were reasonable. and we invited them in to show up at 7 a.m. Now, what happens at 7 a.m.? Well, lots of times they don't show up. Why? Probably because of past experiences like I'm about to explain, but they show up at 7 p.m. They ask to see somebody, like probably the owner or whoever was doing the hiring. Oftentimes they're not even there, or they're busy running around the yard doing something else, right? So it's like the person you're talking to doesn't even expect you. And then you figure out what's then. So, okay, well, wait here. And they sit and they wait for a bit. Then the owner, hey, great to see you, whatever, here's a shirt. You're going to go with Chuck today. And out you go. No training, no talk about wages or what you got hired to do, no company history. It's likely I'm not working safely. I don't understand where everything is in the yard. It's just like, go. And you could imagine if that was most people's first day, how disincentivized they would think about this company as a long-term career plan. Right off the bat, they are treated as if they are disposable. You don't need to know anything. Just jump in that truck and we'll get you going. And I know most companies have good intentions to make that a better experience in the long term, but in the short term, we got work to do and we got to go. And unfortunately, what happens all too often is that short term becomes the medium term, becomes the long term, and we never do those things that we talked about. But what we then get are a bunch of employees who have responsibility to do work, but not the authority to get it done. And I'll define the word authority a little bit different, because certainly you could look at a crew lead as somebody who has authority. They instruct the people that work with them. They have autonomy over the tools they do. They manage the order of operations on a job, right? Like, sure, I have authority. I can tell my laborers what to do today, but they're missing a whole bunch. When I think about authority, I think about things like, and you should think about things like, when you look at a crew lead's typical role, they didn't estimate the job. They don't have any authority over what success should look like and whether it's going to be profitable. They're responsible for bringing this job in on time and for having this job be profitable and efficient and all that, but they didn't have anything to do with the estimate. And so there's a lack of authority there, right? Authority being sort of having an influence over. That's the definition. I don't necessarily mean having a title over. I mean having an influence over when I think about authority. So they also weren't consulted re the estimate. Sometimes that happens. We used to have meetings over designs with our best foreman, and we'd talk about them before we estimated, so I could better understand how they were going to access the job. What was the order of operations overall? What factors might influence this part here, because this part here won't be done and we're going to have to work around it like this way for a week. And those were really valuable conversations, probably made us a ton of profit. But that's also not that consistent across the industry. If you're doing that today, congratulations, probably a great move. If you're not doing that today, you can understand why. They also weren't consulted. They don't order or plan their own materials, so they don't have control over the flow. And as if you've tuned in to any of Mark's previous webinars, you'll know material flow and the availability of materials is one of the biggest sources of waste and inefficiency in a design build job, sometimes maintenance as well, depending on the kind of work. Lack of dedicated tools and equipment. So oftentimes we're sharing tools and equipment, which financially makes sense for some stuff. Also is a reason we're like, hey, I thought I was going to get this. It's not available. Now I got to do it this way. Put up my hands. Or the machine I thought I was going to have delivered to my site never showed up, and now we don't have the right stuff to do it. And what am I supposed to do? They weren't trained well, and they manage employees that weren't trained well. So that's a big one, right? My company didn't invest in me very much in training. And training could be like the skills side, which hopefully they have already, but it also could be like management training. Like, how do I manage these people that I instruct and work with every single day? And how do I interact with customers? And what do the financials look like? And how can I participate in helping this company move forward? I just got off about half an hour ago, a crew budgeting webinar. If you haven't caught that, the recording will be on our website. It's a great type of training. It's not your traditional definition of training, but training employees on how the finances of a crew works and how they can earn more revenue, or more wage, I'm sorry, by earning more revenue. And exactly what that looks like is a huge part of training. It's teaching your crews that every single crew is a business inside this business. Then there's also the lack of customer information. So they don't know necessarily all the requests from the customers. They don't have clear incentives. They don't have clear KPIs and metrics that A, have any clarity of those, and B, even if you have them, they probably don't get them often enough to make a difference. And so when you have that, you have problems, right? I'm advocating for certainly a better start. Imagine when people got hired that your interview, and I'm not going to imagine, I'll talk about what we used to do at the landscape company. In our interviews, we used to talk about the type of work that they were going to get hired for. I'd also pull up a career ladder. I'm going to show you an example a little bit later. Ours didn't look as nice as it does now. It was a Word document, but nevertheless, what we laid out, and this might have been, by the way, the best part of the interview. There's two parts that really stood out to me. This was one of them. We would give them a document. It's like laborer C, laborer B, laborer A. This is how you advance. This is what we pay. And then it might be maintenance crew lead CBA, design build crew lead CBA, lead hand was another role, truck driver, carpentry crew lead, carpentry labor. And we had, as part of those roles, expectations for those roles and wages for those roles. If you're an LMN user, you'll find those in the system library. But awesome for an interview, because what it did right off the bat is sort of set the table to A, where we see this employee fitting, because they're not all getting hired as laborer. C, they're definitely people that came in with experience, and B, how they can move up, right? And the fact that we had a process for this is probably something that was pretty unique for that interviewee. Usually it's like, I'll just get to work and I have no idea when I'm going to get a raise. I'll just try to ask at the right time. So that was one big thing. The next big thing is the C there, systems and processes, right? Showing people that, hey, we track our work this way, we job cost this way, and this is how we know we're going to succeed. Had people saying to me in the interview, I've never seen a landscape company disorganized before, which was amazing. I know now they want to work for us, right? I know they're going to be motivated. And I know on day one, they're going to have higher expectations that we have of them than if I just threw them to the wolves. So the interview is a big part. Pre-start training. So sometimes, hey, we're going to hire you, start next week. Here's some courses online. Greenius is an awesome tool for that. And another big training is shop and truck orientation. So this is really key for the beginning, but especially in the first couple of weeks, giving employees an overview of the yard. I think sometimes crew leads do it, probably not very often. This is something you can film on your phone, put it on YouTube. Greenius has got a great way of doing custom courses where you can just upload this video right there. And then they can watch this before they've ever started on day one, which is big. Now they'll know where the fuel is kept, what kind of fuel goes here, where to park the trucks, where to, like, all the different things that mistakes are going to cause problems with. We can solve those ahead of time. We can also introduce incentive systems if we have that. Maybe you've got a bonus or incentive system. And we can also introduce how we're going to measure performance and how we're going to get feedback. Without all this, we end up having people, and you can imagine the first hire experience I discussed where we don't show up on time and we throw them out. They're going to have low commitment, lack of passion, lack of awareness, lack of accountability, certainly a lack of motivation. When you start working for a company that doesn't really invest any time in your first couple of weeks, you end up with employees who, even if they're very good, end up not investing a lot of their passion into the business. And if you want to change any of this, we have to change some of the ways that we're running our business. And even though we have high turnover and lots of those things that I talked about there seem like, well, if I do all this and I lose the employee, it's a waste of time. That's true. But I guarantee you're going to lose less employees if you do this kind of stuff consistently. And the best part about it is you're going to lose less good employees. You might still lose some bad ones, but you're certainly going to lose less good ones if you've got that in place. So how else can we impact it after the hire? Well, better daily accountability, right? A clear schedule. I know from our discussions with our foreman when we ran, that was their number one frustration. Hey, the schedule changes. So 1A, a schedule is going to change, right? We're never going to be able to guarantee really, really predictable work. But what we can do, and what I did do in a meeting one time, is explain all the variables to the crew so that they understand what we're going with. I need to get paid. This equipment's not ready. This job's not ready to start. We're waiting on materials. This client needs this done now. I need to make payroll. Like, all these things impact what we're going to do that particular day, the weather, right? And so schedules are going to change, but you got to trust that it's in the best interest. And we realize that's frustrating for you who is accountable for a job. So we're going to try to minimize those changes, but they're going to happen. But it's a great job to explain this is why change happens, because I would expect for a lot of you, at least we were this way, schedule changes were our crew's number one frustration. How can I plan and manage work when I show up in the morning and I get sent off somewhere else? And that happened enough. Job specs, right? Okay, now I have a job. I know what I'm going to do. Give me the information I need to take responsibility for this job and do it well. What does that mean? I need to know how many hours we have. I need to know what equipment is planned. I need to know the materials that have been estimated and whatever. And in many cases, I see a lot more companies moving to this. Let's get our crew leads in a position where they're managing their materials. Now, that may mean pulling from the office. It may mean even ordering directly from our vendors. Both are happening. It can be done. And I can speak to the fact that when it's done this way and done well, it's so much better. I used to try to figure out what's happening at each job and call, and there's no way I'm ever going to ask enough questions to know what should happen. But once we passed or delegated that responsibility on the crew leads, things got a lot more efficient. Maybe not for the first little bit, but once they got the hang of it, once they realized they were accountable for that, they got more satisfaction out of their job because they truly ran that site. Also, things on that site went better because they did what they needed to do to get their materials done. And if they needed help, then they called the office, but it was a pull rather than a push. I wasn't doing all the thinking for them. They were there to do the thinking. We were there to support them. Special instructions are also really important. So whether it's written, stuff that the client mentioned, stuff that goes outside like the raw objective facts of the job, site maps, like any information we can give them to make sure that they have the information to do a good job, even when it might not be their job, like they get sent somewhere that they don't usually do, super important. That way people can feel like, oh, okay, I have the tools and information I need to get this job done properly. Now I'm okay with being responsible for the job. What I don't want to be responsible for is a job that doesn't go well, that I just showed up at and somebody showed up 2 hours later and pointed a bunch of fingers, and then I'm now responsible for this that I didn't estimate or talk to a customer about or plan or anything. That's a frustration. And it's also going to stop us from getting great people. Great people are not ever going to work in that environment, ever. They will work for a bit and then they'll go find something else where they can truly do something that they can own and take responsibility for with the commensurate exchange of information, right? We need to give them the information to allow them to succeed in that role. And then last, a score, right? I need to know. And that's why you're going to see that in the crew app everywhere. We've had it for years. It's even more prevalent now in the new crew app, but estimated versus actual hours scoring all the time. Crew efficiency, right? How much time are we spending on revenue generating work versus non-revenue generating? I have the information to do a good job. I'm responsible for this job. And I know if I'm doing a good job. It's that whole feedback loop, all really important. This is an example that I mentioned earlier of that career ladder. Mark showed it on an earlier mastermind when they talked about training. But whether it's in the systems library in LMN, which is a Word doc, or this is what we're talking about, right? Okay, you're going to start here. But with these skills completed, you can go to here. And then from there, these are your response. And then you can go to here and here. And it lays out an opportunity path for everybody so they know exactly what they're walking into. This is really big, not just for culture, but certainly for retention. Now, I want to bring this back a little bit to just talk about what we're doing for you to help this. So we just launched LMN Crew. And we started by going out and conducting over 100 interviews with landscape companies like yourself. And from there, we built journey maps. So what is this? A journey map, if you look up in the top left here, what we're doing is putting ourselves in the shoes of a crew lead. And we're identifying what they do in the morning and in the middle of the day and what they have to do at the end of the day, what their responsibilities are, right down to how they're feeling. And from this, we can extract what we call like a persona. This is the person that's using this. Why am I talking about this? Because we're designing tools and apps that go beyond just buttons and menus and doing stuff. Yes, we need to track schedules. Yes, we need to do stuff for billing. But what's really important as well, especially now more than ever, is building experiences in a job that allows people to flourish. Because as an industry, we struggle with that step. And we want to help LMN companies to have a lot of these tools and wherewithal at their disposal to be able to get around that culture gap and ultimately hire and keep better people. That journey is then we map out like, well, okay, how would this work? And we map out something that not only functions the way it should, but also acts the way it should. It tries to intuit what the crew lead or whoever is using the app is doing or wants to do and makes those steps really obvious and apparent. The new schedule dashboard is a good example. We put that back in front of real people. We get live feedback. Brady's our head UX, along with Megan. You can see both of them on the left, and they'll put it in front of people and say, okay, use it. Why'd you click this? Where would you click next? Like, no instructions. Let's watch them use it. Because the other thing is, we want things to be really intuitive. Nobody had to take a training course to use or to call an Uber. So why shouldn't time tracking be the same way? And so it's more complicated, obviously, but we're doing everything we can to try to make that whole experience, not just functions, but actually what the crew lead is doing, what information they're getting, what scores they're seeing, and how they're doing it in a way that facilitates an enjoyable workday, a responsible and accountable workday, something that helps them level up. And so for the new crew app, if you haven't seen it yet, that includes clear and easy schedules that we've launched, more history information. So if you haven't noticed this yet, crews can go into the history of a job and pull information about what happened on previous services. That was a big request that came out from people. More scores, the crew efficiency, that daily efficiency score is a big one. What is that? Well, it measures time on jobs versus payroll time that are not jobs. So basically revenue generating time versus non-revenue generating time. You can set goals for your crew leads. They get a score on every timesheet, how much time they spent on revenue generating versus non-revenue generating tasks. And obviously we want them to maximize that. But we got to give them those tools to understand that. It's all well and good to sit back in an office and say, we have too much wasted time. But why should you have to supervise that? More efficiently would be, let's give them the tools to supervise themselves. It's a great, Mark's mentioned on at least a mastermind before, the Toyota way. It talks about eliminating waste. And one of the key wastes for Toyota that they eliminated was quality control inspections. That sounds weird, right? But the car comes down the line, then they do a quality control inspection. And everybody should know, I would hope, that Toyota's got a pretty good reputation for quality. Well, what they realized is like, hey, getting a car all the way down the line and then inspecting it for quality isn't efficient. These quality inspections should be baked in at every step of the process. And if we can't do that, we have a problem. We got to redefine that process. And so by the time it gets to the end, it's already done it. And this is like this, right? Why look at your revenue generating time at the end of the year? Why not give that to crews every day so that they can improve that process that little bit each and every day? And hopefully at the end of the year, the efficiency that you're hoping just comes out naturally by a better process. We're going to continue to define better processes over the next couple of months. You're going to see training appear in the crew app. Why? Because you're paying staff every day to sit in trucks and drive around. And training is one of the things that get asked often, like, well, how do I pay the staff? How do I whatever? Here's an idea. Just have them take training while they're driving. You've got all that time already that we're talking about, non-revenue generating, whatever. Let's use it for a productive purpose. Let's also try to layer in career paths. Learning paths is another thing you're going to see in Greenius, so that as an employee, I'm not just taking a bunch of courses. I am working myself towards some kind of certification or title that says, hey, I've completed these 8 somewhat related courses and achieved this milestone, so that I get a sense of satisfaction over what we've done. And if you master these things, there's a whole bunch of other crew stuff coming as well that is even more exciting. I'm going to keep that one under the hat for now. But we're going to put that stuff out as the year goes on. I hope you leave this webinar understanding that A, culture is important, and B, your culture is important to us at LMN. And we're going to continue to look at that as a focus of everything we build software-wise to help make sure that you have the best culture possible so that we can hire and keep the best people possible. And we're both happy. Join us next week. Next week, we're going to resume with I believe it's cold calling tactics next week. Mark will be back in the hot seat here. He'll be running that one. You can sign up for that, or you can scan that QR code that you see there. That'll get you directly to the link. Also, should mention this. Watch out for the Academy certification program. If you are looking for like a more in-person experience when it comes to learning LMN, 5-day Academy certifications happening across the states. You can get details on our website, golmn.com/certification there, or scan that QR code. But you can send staff there. They can sit in for 5 days and just get totally immersed in LMN from first lead to final job costing, and really come back with the information you need them to know to get the most out of LMN. And I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Mark for giving me the hot seat this week. And I guess I'll finish with any questions that came up. All right, a bunch in the chat, but mostly just hellos, so all good. Wanted to thank everybody for taking some time to spend with us today. I know things are probably getting busy for a lot of you. Weather's been good, whatever. So you chose to spend this time with us. We really appreciate it. We're going to do everything we can to make that time valuable. I can see a couple of questions here. Scott asked, do you email a copy of this recording? 100%. We can get you that copy. Just email us. I know we have, I don't know if they go out by email if you attend, but if you don't get the email, let us know. We definitely have a recording of it. We'll send that out to you. They're also on our website. We have all the old ones on our website. If you ever want to go there, we can forward you the link after. Jeremy can forward you the link in the chat. Once again, appreciate everybody's time. We'll see you next week. Same time, same place, probably a different presenter. Thanks again for joining us.